We don't have much time. We need to get into the longship. Come with me if you want to learn about Viking longships. Let's go! Hello everybody, it's me, Mr. Bradley. But today, I am Bradley Bloodbeard. In today's lesson, we're going to be learning about Viking longships. But before I begin, hit that subscribe button with all the might and using Odin's wisdom. And to start the questions on the screen right now. In today's lesson, we're going to be learning about Viking longships. I'm here with a group of real-life Vikings who are going to take me down in their Viking longship down this river.
I couldn't wait to meet my crew of strong Viking warriors. I had been told that I was going to board a longship full of tough, bearded Viking men in their authentic Viking clothing. To save time, I was already in my best Viking clothing, ready to board their longship. As they approached, I could feel my heart beating faster and faster. This was a moment I had been training for. But to my surprise, when the longship arrived, I was not greeted by a crew of axe-wielding Viking men wearing chainmail and leather. Instead, I was greeted by a crew of pretty normally dressed women. Not only was I the only one dressed as a Viking, but I also was very bad at rowing compared to the rest of the crew. As I was laughed at by the crew and shouted at by the leader.
Pause in the air, don't pause in the water. You're gonna slow it down.
Any more pointers, Skipper?
Pause and wait on Kira coming back to you. Stretch forward, pause, stretch forward, pause, forward, pause, yes, stretch forward.
I'm the only Viking here, and I'm getting in trouble already.
I began to think someone was playing some sort of joke on me.
The Vikings came from parts of Scandinavia, such as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Most Vikings lived by the coast, and the country was covered in hills, mountains, and massive valleys with humongous fjords, as the Vikings liked to call them, which were inlets of the sea surrounded by two big valleys. The fjords were almost like giant rivers going through the valleys. Because of all of the hills, valleys, mountains, and fjords, the best way for a Viking to get around was by aeroplane. What? What do you mean there was no airplanes? Then how did they go on holidays? The best way for a Viking to get around was by boat. You can see their beautiful longship behind me. The word Viking means seafarer pirate, and that's exactly what the Vikings were. The Vikings were curious people, and were always traveling to other countries to attack, raid, invade, and begin new settlements on the country to live, sometimes even in places where people had never been before, like Iceland, Greenland, and Newfoundland in North Canada. To do this, they had to be skilled in making boats, and thankfully they were. Well, thankfully for the Vikings, maybe not so much the rest of the world. They were brutally murdered, robbed, and made into slaves.
Thankfully, after a little bit of practice, I began to get better at rowing. Now that the crew had stopped laughing at me, I began to enjoy the experience of rowing down the shallow waters of the river in our longship. The banks were covered in long green grass and colourful flowers, and the sky was painted golden with the setting sun. Anyway, back to the longship.
The Viking longship was long and narrow. It was very light, which meant that the hull, the bottom of the boat, was very shallow in the water. This was good because it made the Viking longship extra fast because there was no water pushing against the boat. Because it was shallow, it also meant that it could sneak up rivers, which meant that the Vikings could go deeper and deeper into their enemy's country and attack them by surprise. The fact the hull was so shallow meant that the Viking longships could even do beach landings unlike those bigger, heavier ships. These lightweight longships could even be pushed overland by using logs to roll the ship on, and of course, a crew of very strong Viking men. Viking longships were also double-ended and symmetrical. This meant that the shape of the front of the ship was the same as the shape of the back of the ship. This meant that the Vikings could change directions from going forwards to backwards without having to turn the entire boat around, like most other ships at the time. This was incredibly useful if the Vikings ever had to make a quick getaway, and it was also very useful if they were about to crash into an obstacle, like an iceberg. Another advantage of the Viking longship was that it could be powered by both wind and by oars. The Viking longship had big masts and sails to catch the wind to blow it across the stormy oceans. But when the weather was not windy, it could also be powered by a crew of men rowing the boat with big wooden oars, which was also useful for sneakily going up rivers and controlling the boat. The Vikings could also fit their round shields on the sides of the boat to protect themselves as they're rowing down the river, where they could be shot by arrows from the enemies on the sides of the bank. The Vikings also liked to decorate their boats with scales and faces of dragons and sea serpents. The sails of the Viking ship was also coloured blood red. This not only showed off our power and skill in making boats, but it also struck fear in our enemies. And so we've come to the end of our video about Viking longships. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and why not check out some of the other Viking videos on my channel.
Special thanks to the members of Ballydugan Medieval Settlement in Downpatrick who helped to make this video possible.
And as always, thanks for watching. See you in Valhalla. Hurrah!